Hello, everyone, and welcome to the AscentialTest webinar. I'm delighted to tell you I have two guests today, and I'll be introducing them when the time comes. We have John Seema from Carrier and Robert Carlson from Smart Systems. What we're going to talk about today is what I call gnarly problems. It's kind of one of my favorite subjects, actually. All of these examples that we're going to be talking about today come out of real support issues. Some of them you will see live because we have two guests, but the other ones I'll just be talking about. And so let me just go over our overview first. We're going to talk about how to determine if the target application is not responding due to a hooking failure. We're going to learn how to implement a try-catch. That may be something that you've never done in order to avoid an error that would otherwise halt the execution of a test. We're going to learn how and when to use low-level events to avoid a test API failure. And then we're going to learn how and when to use something called app enable to hook and unhook the target application at runtime. I'll talk about using unregister and click unregister. We're going to learn about close window timeouts, and then we're going to talk about some focus issues that can occur. So the first topic we're going to talk about is about test API and hooking failures. And what can happen here is when you get one of these failures, you're going to know it because you're going to get an error like capture all responses failed or zombie process detected. Maybe the target application is going to freeze. Maybe the target application even crashes or closes. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to turn it over to John Seema from Carrier, and he's going to show you a situation where this happened, and then so he's going to show you the before and then he's going to show you the after. So go ahead, Sandra, and turn it over to John.
Hello, everyone. I'm going to show you something that I went through that was kind of frustrating. And can anyone see my screen?
Not yet. It's okay now.
Okay. So we have this application here, our target application. Hopefully you could all see it. This is called Mastermind Business. And we have a couple of data fields, and all I wanted to do is change the zip code for this address. So what I usually do is I click inside the zip code field, and I type a different zip code, and then I want to hit tab, and this brings up a selection of zip code defaults that are all for 92704, and they contain other information about that zip code. So I just have to pick a row here, and then it's done. It saves it. So I wanted to do this through AscentialTest, and initially I have defined these objects are Power Builder objects that are exist. So I'll just show you here. What I wanted to do is MMBO is my main application. Then I have a customer site form, and then I have a zip code field, and I use the type keys and invoke the tab key. And this is what I try to do. So let's see if we could do that. I'm going to run this. Let's see it finds my dialog. It types in the zip code. And then we wait and wait, and it's supposed to pop up the zip code selector and then display, but it did not do it. So as you can see, it failed. Let's do this again. If I have it set to something else and I hit tab, it's supposed to open Yes. All right, so I'm gonna run it again, see if we get any better luck this time. And so it does bring up the selector, but it gets hung like this. And we've tried this so many different times. And you could see in the background that AscentialTest says it's still running. So at this point, I'm thinking maybe it just needs more time. Maybe there's something, but normally it should have been able to select a row by now. And I think there's a timeout. I don't know. Is there a default timeout for AscentialTest when it?
Yeah, eventually, John, it'll time out.
What is it? 20 seconds, 30 seconds?
The default would be 60 seconds.
Okay, so it says that it failed. It could not find select zip code defaults, even though that dialog was up. So the problem was, Brian explained to me, is that when I try to hit tab through my app object definition, it somehow messes up when it hits tab, it actually loses the test. What do you call it, Brian? The test execution?
Yeah, the hook into the application failed.
So the right way to do it is to use this line above and just call a UA for the sort of like a general key and not associated to my actual object. If you just pick this general key, somehow it would not lose the test execution. So let's try it now. If I uncommented that line, wait a minute. It shouldn't have to log me in. I'm already logged in. Oh, it's because okay, let's try it again. Here we are. There we go. So now I was able to find it and select the zip code row for me right away. And so that's proof that that first line that I was invoking was messing up. It was losing its focus and you could never get it back. So that was quite frustrating. This was something that I probably would not have been able to figure out on my own. So it's something that you guys may run into in the future. It might be useful. That's it.
Thank you, John. That's perfect. Sandra, you can make me the presenter again. So as John showed you, the issue, like John mentioned, was that when using the actual test API, typing a tab is what caused that problem. And the issue really is this. If you select a value from a dropdown or put in a value to a text field, in this case, it was with a type keys, it could have been with a set as well, that then causes a dialog box to pop up, that will sometimes cause a test API failure. We don't exactly know why, because this test API was written in the late 80s or the early 90s by Sybase, and there's evidently a little bit of a flaw in it. And but over time, we have figured out this workaround, and the workaround works, as John showed you very well. All you have to do is use the general agent to put the type keys in, as opposed to putting it in using the app object, and then that avoids the problem entirely. There's another way that you can sometimes avoid this problem, because not everybody knows that there's actually two APIs. There's two APIs that PowerSoft Sybase had created, again, very early on in the history of PowerBuilder. They call one of them FNX, and then there's the original test API. And I'm going to show you how you toggle between the two, because what we have found, and this is fairly recently, we've learned that the original test API sometimes avoids these crashes, because that's basically what we did to John's apps. When he said it closed, the app actually crashed. No dump, but it just suddenly closes. Or freezes. I think in his case, maybe it froze, but in some cases you can see the app actually go away. But it turns out that there's these two test APIs, and I want to show you the difference. So I'm just going to bring up any PB. If I bring up my profile, my UA server profile, you'll notice this checkbox here called Use FNX. Now, by default, this is always set. And the reason why we do that is because when folks are evaluating AscentialTest, it's easier for them to just use FNX. And you know what? Most of the time it works 100%, no problem. But when we do run into a problem, like the one that John demonstrated for you, we'll often say, excuse me, to the customer, let's try the other test API. And to do that, you uncheck FNX. But it's not as simple as that all the time, because sometimes we find that in the registry, the test API has not been enabled. FNX, you don't have to do anything. It's just you turn it on, you turn it off. Whereas if you do turn off FNX and use the original test API, then you do have to make sure that in your registry, under Computer, HKey Current User, Software, Sybase, PowerBuilder, and then you need to find your version of PowerBuilder. For each one of these, you will find a switch or a key called Enable Test API, and that needs to be set to 1. So to do that, you set it to hexadecimal 1. Once you do that, then you can uncheck FNX and use the original test API. Now, do you need to do that? Does everybody need to go do that right away? No. If you're not having any problems, you can just go ahead and go with the FNX. But if you are experiencing a problem like the one that John showed you, then this is the first thing that we try to do. If that doesn't work, then we have found that other solution that John explained to you, where you can put in the UA.gen key events, and that will avoid the whole problem. Now, one note for users of PowerBuilder 2019 R3, you'll notice here I have a 19.1 and I have a 19.2. I don't have a 19.3. That's because at 2019 R3, Appian has separated the runtime from the IDE, and so you'll just continue to use 19. So for R3 users, you have to make sure that your 19.0 has the Enable Test API set to 1. Okay, so I just wanted to explain that. Thank you again, John, for explaining that. Great job. Now, I want to talk about another issue. And this is a situation where the target application actually has a bug in it. And this is, again, a real life situation. This actually happened relatively recently. Came to an application where it had a data window, and the data window had a lot of rows in it, something like 400 rows. But if you looked at the scroll bar that was alongside of the data window, the scroll bar itself was taking up almost the entire scrolling space. And you know that can't be right? Because that means you can't move it very much in order to get to these 400 rows, most of them not even in view. I think only about 10 of the items were actually in view. So when AscentialTest tried to go ahead and make a selection, and you know that if the row that AscentialTest wants to interact with is not displayed, it's going to try to scroll it into view. It noticed right away that there was a scroll bar problem, and it threw an error. saying that the scroll bar, couldn't scroll to the item. And again, that's because the application had a bug where the scroll bar was taking up almost the whole scrollable space. So what we decided to do was, instead of using the actual data window, we switched over to using our render text solution, which probably most of you are familiar with for one reason or another. I'm just going to show you how to enable that for a Power Builder application. For other types of applications like a .NET, you don't have to do this, but for Power Builder, you do. So let me show that. We'll just go into, again, let's pick one here. You'll notice that for the different types of data window, composite, crosstab, grid, group, label, NUp, tabular, tree view, there are all these checkboxes that will allow you to turn on the render text for that particular data window in this style. And I always recommend that you also check the combine, because that means that you can still use the data window, but for some situations you might want to use the render text as well. So I usually use them in tandem. Instead of in either or, I'll have both, but that's how you enable it. Once you do that, then what we're able to do is, using our render text solution, what I did here was I did a try, and this is important to understand. What a try catch does is it allows you to avoid an error that would halt your test case. So I'm saying lookup, that's the name of the dialog box. Some records is the name of the table. Dot, here's the class of render text row. The text equals some value, and then we're going to click on it. So we're trying to select the row. If we get an error, meaning the row's not in view in this case, we're going to catch it. Do a page down. And by the way, in this application, once you page down once, the scroll bar actually did correct itself. The size became normal, what you would expect. Now, whether or not you need to do a disable cache, which forces AscentialTest to take a new snapshot, and a clear render cache, is based on the application. In most cases, you actually don't need to do that. I kind of did this as an extra precaution. And then we increment our loop, and then we go back and try again. So what will happen is that in this loop, we'll keep paging down until AscentialTest is able to select that row. But the key thing here that I wanted you to understand was how to use the try catch. Again, the try catch is there to be able to execute a statement that would throw an error, but you don't want the test to stop in this case because you're expecting an error. The error would be that it can't find the value. And so we're going to catch it, page down, and keep trying. And we're going to try again. Now, I did put an exit in this loop just so that we don't get stuck in an infinite loop. So we're only going to try 10 times. That must have been, in this particular case, the total number of items that would get you to the bottom if you had scrolled all the way down. So that's how you use a try catch. Now I want to talk about another way to avoid an error. This is relatively new. A couple of years we introduced this. This is something called App Enable, and it was actually designed not for the purpose of avoiding a problem like I'm going to show you. It was implemented actually for one of our companies, one of our customers. They have a US and a European office. I don't think I should name them just because I haven't asked for their permission. But they had an application where from one application, they had multiple applications. From one application that they had hooked, they would launch another application. And ordinarily, when you do that, both applications are responsive because AscentialTest is always trying to communicate with all of the applications that it hooked. But in this particular situation, the original application that launched the second one became unresponsive. And what would happen is even though we were trying to interact with it, it would throw an error. AscentialTest would throw an error because the hook, it was trying to communicate with all of the applications, and this one wouldn't respond. And so we had a workaround for that customer for the short term, but then we started thinking about the issue, and we came up with this solution called App Enable. And what App Enable allows you to do, let me show you the help. App Enable allows you to unhook, basically, unhook a hooked application at runtime. And so, and let me just bring up UA server as well so that you can see. What I'm talking about is the name of the profile here. So I have, you know, the name Notepad here because I sometimes do examples with a Notepad. So the value that goes in here is the name of the UA server application profile. That's what you're putting in there. And so if you want to use App Enable to disable applications, there's a second parameter that's a Boolean parameter, and you can set that to true or false. Well, even though it wasn't intended to work this way, what we found was if we make the first parameter empty, and by the way, this is a comma delimited string, so you can actually App Enable multiple profiles at any time. You put the whole list inside of this comma delimited string. And then you say true, and that will disable anything else. So if you had, say, 1 or 2 applications that you wanted to keep the hook for, but you wanted to disable the other, that's what you would do. And that sort of points back to the intended purpose. The user would continue to hook the spawned application, but it would unhook everything else. But what we discovered that in support was that we could use that to our advantage. If we wanted to unhook an application that we were concerned would go into a bad state if we tried to do something to it, we tried to interact with it in a way that it was going to cause an API failure. What we do is we unhook everything by putting nothing inside of the double quote and saying true. So that's basically saying unhook everything. Then we do something like what John did. We're going to do a command against the application, not using the API. We're using UA.GenKeyEvent. So in this case, we're sending an F5 to the application. Then we're going to give the application time, because that's what the problem was. This application was busy and it was unresponsive. Then after that time, we can hook it again, and then we can continue on with what we're doing. So App Enable is very useful that way. It turned out in this particular case, we didn't need to do that because we turned off FNX and we used the other test API, and that resolved the problem. But I saved this solution because I thought it would be an interesting one that would be useful for someone at some point. Okay, now I want to talk about something similar, but slightly different. We have a couple methods that you might be familiar with. One of them is called unregister, and the other one is called click unregister. Now, these are used typically when a customer has decided that they want to kill the target application. This isn't usually from an API failure. It may be that they know about a bug in their application and they know that the application has gone into a bad state or is going to crash. And so they will often go out and through UA.execute, they would then just issue a kill. So they kill their application. But I always caution people that if you're going to kill an application that AscentialTest has hooked into, it could end up putting UA server in a bad state. So what I always recommend is if you're going to kill the application, unregister it first. And so I'll show you where that is in the help as well. So let's find unregister. I'll tell you another situation where this is used in a minute. So it's very simple to use. You just say the name of your application or dialog. It doesn't really matter. And then you just say, you call unregister, and that will unregister the application. AscentialTest will no longer be hooked into it. And then you can go ahead and you can externally kill the application, usually by doing a system.execute. And then you're going to call the Windows kill with the process ID of your application. You can get the process through AscentialTest, and then you can just kill it. So again, if you're doing that, you should always, maybe you're not having problems, but you could have problems. I would always call unregister before you do that. Now, here's a reason why I don't think you should do this. I've seen customers where they don't want to build a close mechanism in their application. In other words, they've opened up a lot of windows and they don't want to try to implement the close all windows that we provide. They don't want to tailor it for their application. They think it's easier to just kill the application and then just execute their next test. Personally, I don't agree with that, and I try to convince people otherwise. But you know, if you're doing that, I think there are better ways to do that, and you can call us and we can talk you through it. But in any case, if you are insisting on doing that, please call the unregister before you kill your application. Click unregister is similar. The difference is that for click unregister, you actually are going to click something to close your application. The application is responsive. It's not an unresponsive application. And you want to click on a button, usually a close box for your target application. But then as the application is closing, we're going to go ahead and unregister it. Another topic, timeouts. Sometimes if you've constructed your automation where you're constantly closing your application. For example, you may be running a test, so you're going to execute your app start, your app state, you're on, which would be your start, your on start. You're going to execute a test. Your on finish is going to close the application. So every single test case starts with the application coming up. You execute the test. It ends with the application coming down. There are reasons for doing that. I think that's not typical, but sometimes you might want to do that. Typically with a browser, you know, maybe you're clearing the cache in between so that it's always a new user experience. You know, it's not an existing user that has cookies and things like that. Again, there are other ways to do that. You can clear cookies and things like that through AscentialTest, but that is one type of test that browser users sometimes do. But what we find is sometimes when you close a browser, it actually takes a bit of time before the browser really closes. And I'm seeing this more with Edge. So what you can do is you can put a close window timeout, which means that in between the time that the target application closes, and then, you know, the very next test would go to start the process again. And the problem is that if one browser process is closing and then the other one starts up, that could cause some problems for the browser itself. So what this assures is that it's going to give a timeout. So it's going to give some time for the application to close so that it's fully closed before the next test case begins. It's, in a way, it's like implementing a sleep in between two test cases, one that would close the browser and then the other one that would bring the browser up. So that's a good thing to know how to do in case you're running into a problem. Again, these things are not anything that you should go out and do right away if you're not experiencing a problem. But if you are having a problem, then that would be how you're going to solve it. Now, at this point, I want to introduce Robbie from Smart Systems. So what Robbie's going to show you is he's got an interesting issue where when he tries to set a value to some of his text fields, his application is going to pop up a dialog box, which would then, have to be closed. So I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Robbie, and he's going to show you the before and after the same way that John did. So Robbie, go ahead and take it away, and you can share your screen.
Okay. Hello, everybody. Give me 1 second here. All right,
Yep.
Can you see my screen?
We can.
Do you see smart systems up here?
Yes.
All right. Okay. So my problem was we have this window. I was just going to enter in data into these fields. So initially, I'd set up this step that's just taking in some values and then setting the value on each field. So when this was run, initially, the problem was that we would get this pop-up box, this data window error. And then AscentialTest basically became unresponsive. If we wait a moment, we'll see that we get an error from it. So we get this set focus failed after 0 retries. If we look at the snapshot, whoops. Yeah, so this time I got a snapshot of AscentialTest. Sometimes I'd get a snapshot of the application.
Yeah, that's just because you switched context in between.
Yeah, with this data window error, which in the snapshot, that data window error was invisible. So basically, AscentialTest is trying to find the application, but it couldn't find the application. The reason being is this SKU code field that we have. Once the cursor is focused in there, if you try to leave the field, it won't let you until you put a value in there. So if I were to put a value in and go to the next field, there's no problem. So the solution that we came up with is, instead of using the test API set value, we're actually clicking into the field, checking if what was passed in is something was passed in, and then using the UAge and key events to actually type the keys into the field, and then issuing a tab to move to the next field. So if we try running this new step, something happened.
Always when you're trying to demo.
Yeah, right. Looks like UA lost its hook with the application. So here, let me try this again. Let's see if we can.
Might want to look at your UA server and see if it's healthy. See if you got a process.
It says it's registered, but I think this test is stuck now.
Oh, test is still
I'm gonna
running. Yeah.
Try closing UA server and see if that.
It probably won't close while it's running. Did it close?
Yeah, it closed.
Oh, okay, cool. So you might want to start UA server again manually and look at the process. Make sure the process looks good.
All right, it says it's registered. I guess we'll
Mm-hmm.
try this again. No, didn't work. Well, what the heck?
You even have a set act in your test, don't you? You start with a set act.
Yeah.
Close the application, Rob, and then try coming back in. Close the target.
Okay. All right.
Murphy's Law.
All right, let's try it again. See what happens.
There we go.
So this time it entered in the information without any problem. We avoided that message that popped up because once there was a value in the SKU code field, we could tab to the next field without that error popping up. But for some reason, AscentialTest with the test API trying to do the set value would cause that message box to pop up. Even if I closed it manually, it would just keep popping up and it would never get a value into that field. So.
And how many of these kinds of issues do you find in your application, Robbie? Is it in a lot of different places, or is it only in certain?
No, these there's just a few of these windows that they need to be updated. We generally aren't using that a required value in the data windows in many places in our application. So for now, doing this is the workaround, and seems
Do you
to
have
work
any?
well, so.
Do you have any required fields where it doesn't, or does it seem to be true for all your mandatory fields?
It's just for the required fields that are set up this way. In most of the application, we're checking those fields on the save.
Got it.
Instead of while they're actually entering the information into the fields. So,
yes, that makes sense.
Yeah. Which in those cases we don't have a problem. So.
Got it. Awesome. Thank you.
Yeah, no problem.
Sandra, you can pass it back over to me. So that was very interesting, and we've sort of wondered, what is the issue going on here? And what we found is that when AscentialTest goes and tries to put a value into a field, the first thing we do is we set the focus to the field. And that's why Robbie showed you that really strange error that said that set focus failed after 0 retries. The 0 retries is a little bit strange. But what we believe happens is that when we go to set the initial focus to these fields, the application seems to interpret it as we're about to leave the field without putting a value in. And Robbie showed you what happens if you try to leave the field when you don't put a value in. It pops up that that dialog box right away. And so that is a good way to handle it. And Robbie's example was interesting because he showed you he wasn't always passing a value in, so he always checks to see whether or not the value is either empty or null, because if it is, then he just skips over the field and basically just tabs through it. Whereas when it is passing a value in, then he will put that value in using the gen key events and then tab. And so I get this problem, not frequently, but enough so that I know what to do now every time this occurs. And for a customer a couple of weeks ago, I created this thing called set value mandatory field, which essentially does exactly what Rob just showed you. It takes in a value and it clicks in the field, and then it does the gen key events, and then it tabs out. And the only difference is here, because I extended the class PB column, it now shows up in the actions panel, down below. So where you have the set, the verify, get, event, and other, this will show up under event because I set the metadata of the percent action. I set the metadata to true. But this is essentially the same solution that you just saw. So in summary, we talked about how to determine whether the target application is responding due to a hooking failure. We talked about try catch to avoid errors that would otherwise halt the execution of a test. We talked about how and when to use the low level events. And when I say low level, I'm really talking about the UA, which both John and Robert showed you. They use the UA events. Those are what we call low level events in order to avoid problems with the test API. The test API comes into play anytime you use an app object. How and when to use app enable to hook and unhook at runtime. How to use unregister and click unregister. Talked about the closed window timeouts, and then finally how to handle the set focused issues. So at this point, we have some time for questions, and then I'll talk a little bit about what we're working on right now. But let's handle any questions that we have first.
Yes, we already have one question. So, can the specific error message in try catch also be determined by a function such as get error message?
Yes, you can do that. So when I did the try catch, and let's go to the help. I think we can find that. So when I did my try catch, I didn't catch with an E exception, but if you do catch with an exception, then there's something called I think it's get message. So you can check to see what the message is, because maybe you want to do different things based on what the particular message is. Let me just see if I can quickly find that. Let's see, so if I go to try catch, yeah, here we go. So you see there's different ways to do a catch. In fact, in all these examples, it's doing the catch with the exception. So when you do a try and then you do a catch with an exception, you can say exception. I usually just call mine E, but you can call it whatever you want. Then you can get the message by saying e.getMessage. So that's exactly what the customer, what the question was about, being able to get at this e.getMessage. So that's how you do it. You don't have to say e exception here. That's optional. But if you want to get that message, then you always say catch and then the exception, usually like this. Good question. Any other questions?
Not for the moment.
Okay. As always, if there's anything that anyone who attends these seminars is interested in learning about, please send suggestions. I know that the tips and tricks have been popular, and I've sort of been compiling a list of some new ones that I don't even really, I do automatically, and then when I do them in front of a customer during a support session, they're like, what did you just do? So I'm keeping a list of those, so we'll be doing another one of those sessions coming up soon, but always looking for suggestions about things that people are interested in. Can also tell you a little bit about what we're working on. What we're working on right now is 994, and we've made some progress. Some of you might notice that if you did a copy step and then you went and tried to rename a parameter, it crashes. Well, that's been fixed. We just tested that the other day. Someone else noticed that if you messed around with the hook try interval, which you should not do unless you're talking to someone here in support, but if you set it to you know, a value that is too low, you could freeze your entire OS and have to reboot your machine. So we prevented that. Now there's a min threshold. Someone reported, Andre, if you're there, I think it was you, that date now is actually not working correctly. It was actually working like date time. It was holding internally the date time information. And I came up with a workaround where we just cast what came back to an integer, but that really was a bug. Thank you for reporting it, and that's been fixed. Oh, I can show you this one. Someone suggested some shortcuts, keyboard shortcuts for some stuff in the step test editor. So I'll demonstrate that in a moment. Also, this was discovered, I think by Toby, if you're there. The date was not correct on test set reports if you weren't in the United States, you know, where we always say, you know, month, day, year. So now we're looking at the location and we're formatting the date properly. What's being worked on today is actually the embedded edge in a Power Builder application. So we made some progress on that yesterday, and that will be part of 994 as well. There's a lot of other things coming. We just really got started on it, and we're thinking probably late August, September for that release. So let me show you some of the new. Yeah, I think people will like this, that like to not have to use the mouse. So if you want to comment a line now, you can just say Control T, and that will comment a line, and you can say Control W, and that will uncomment the line. If you want to clear the line, you can say Control R, and that will clear the line as well. So, and then of course you can bring it back with a Control Z. So those are new keyboard shortcuts that have been implemented. So whoever made that suggestion, thank you. That was a great suggestion. That is all I have for you guys today. If you have any other questions, now is a good time to ask them.
Yes, we received another one. Is there more difference between having FNX option active or inactive, or does it or it doesn't matter as long as it works?
Yeah, great question. So you won't notice any changes in your tests. So for example, if you had done everything with FNX and then because you were working with us and we said, you know what, we can probably avoid that issue by turning FNX off and going back to the other extension. I've never seen a situation where it caused any kind of an issue with existing tests. They're essentially the same. I have heard customers tell me that the performance might be slightly different with one or another. I wish I could tell you which one off the top of my head might be a little bit faster. That is a possibility with some applications, but I consider them to be roughly equivalent. If we do have an error where there's a test API issue, though, it's always with FNX, and then we turn off FNX and go back the other way. I've never seen a situation where it's the other way around, where there was a problem with the original one and FNX solved it. That doesn't mean there isn't a case, but if there is, I've never seen it. So another really good question. Thank you for asking.
So I think that's all for the moment.
Okay, well, thank you all for your attendance. Hope you enjoyed this. Thank you, John and Robert, for guesting on this. I think it's much more interesting when there's more voices and can see live applications. So I appreciate you guys stepping up to do that for everyone. As I said, if anyone has any seminar suggestions, please send them along. And as always, Sandra will be sending me this video, and we'll get it posted onto our YouTube channel